Hey, this is Ryan Reuter at Oklahoma State University. Let's talk just a few minutes about prehension of forages in grazing animals. So let's talk about a few of our common ones and describe the way that these animals consume forage. We'll talk about cattle first, and if you know anything about cattle, you've kind of seen some of their grazing behavior. Is that the way that they prehend forages is that they use their tongue a lot to sweep forage into their mouth. They kind of stick their tongue out and wrap around forage and sweep that forage into their mouth. They definitely use their bottom lip and their bottom incisors to pinch that forage against the hard dental pad that's at the roof of their mouth, and then they kind of have a head jerk motion that tears the forage off as they've got it trapped there. And so they have a pretty heavy top lip, and of course no upper incisors. And so they typically don't use the top lip too much in gathering forage. They're going to concentrate on using their tongue to sweep the forage into their mouth, and have that bottom lip and teeth that is the way that they tear the forage off. A consequence of that is that cattle typically aren't as selective as some of the other grazers, and they typically can't graze as close to the ground as some of our other grazing animals. For instance, sheep and goats. Sheep and goats have a little bit different method, and even it's even different between sheep and goats, obviously. But in sheep and goats, they definitely use their bottom lip and bottom teeth, similar to cattle, but they have a lot more refined muzzle. Their top lips are thinner, a lot more mobile, a lot more dexterous, and so they can use their top lips quite a bit to help get forage into their mouth. Again, they don't have top incisors, so they're going to use their bottom incisors to hold that forage against the hard dental pad on the upper part of their mouth and tear the forage off. But they're going to be able to use their lips quite a bit more than cattle would be. That lets them be more selective. It lets them graze closer to the ground. If you've seen areas grazed by sheep that have been overgrazed, they definitely can graze really close to the ground. And then the final one we'll talk about here are horses. And if you've ever watched horses graze, it's pretty interesting to watch. If you never have done it, I recommend that you find some horses and watch them graze. But their top lip is almost prehensile, you could say. It is very mobile. It's very sensitive. It's very dexterous. They can use their top lip much more than cattle can. And so they use their top lip, their bottom lip, to gather forage, get feed into their mouth, and then they obviously, horses have upper incisors that cattle and sheep and goats don't have, and so they use their lower incisors and top incisors to actually cut forage and get it away from the plant like that. And so an interesting thing to do with horses is if you've ever fed a few horses and had pelleted horse feed and spilled some on the ground or in the dirt, you've watched horses actually pick up individual quarter-inch pellets of feed. They can pick up those individual pellets out of the dirt with just their lips and not eat hardly any dirt. And so it's pretty interesting how they can use that top lip. Obviously lets them graze close to the ground and be much more selective than cattle can be as well, if they're in an environment where they need to do that. So let's watch a cow graze here for a minute. I think you'll see some of this. This is obviously an older dairy cow over in Ireland or Scotland, and so you can see how this cow is picking that top heavy lip. The top lip is pretty heavy, pretty immobile, and she's just kind of picking it up out of the way and using that tongue to reach out and grab forage and get that forage into her mouth. This is obviously really nice pasture, so she's not having to be very selective, but she's able to get that forage and pin the forage to the roof of her mouth, and then use a little bit of a head motion to tear it off. So, good cow there. So let's compare that to some goats grazing and the way that they graze. This video is about targeted grazing with goats, and you can certainly click here and watch the whole video if you want to, but I'm going to slip over to about 5.5 minutes into this video, and we'll watch an example of some goats grazing. And I think you'll see that they're obviously quite a bit different than cattle.
In the toolbox, something different
And you'll be able to see here how they're
the kids love it.
really
the
using
adults love it.
they're obviously being more selective. They're grazing up off the ground with their head up.
That,
And right there you see an example of a goat using those top lips that are much more sensitive, much finer than cattle, and they're able to pick little pieces of the forage and be pretty selective about what they want to eat.
And in fact, when they've
goat
been
doesn't look
using
very
them
good
in
right
other
there,
areas, they found that they
the rest of
increase
them look like they're doing okay.
quality. They
So that's
get rid
just
of
an
the invasive
example
pests,
of
and they get rid
a
some
couple of
the-
different types of prehension behavior. And so appreciate your attention, and we'll move on to the next topic.